Welcome on board as we start off on the self-governance series. My name is Ruth Wanjiru, founder of the Mandate Generals, a platform whose mission is raising a generation-anchored family on biblical values for two transformative purposes. Number one being self-governance, and number two being for societal impact. In this video, we shall be looking at that bit of self-governance, and the subsequent videos will be basically a series that is themed Mastery Before Influence, all channeled towards speaking about this aspect of self-governance. So, what is self-governance? We'll start by looking at the definition of this term. So self-governance is basically the ability to lead oneself. It's also that ability to live a disciplined life where one is able to walk according to the truth, according to wisdom, and according to values. And when we look at self-governance, this is basically being able to be in control and in charge of one's emotions. One's emotions should not be overlooked, because once we get to overlook our emotions and our impulses, then what normally happens, we end up suppressing them. But for self-governance, in this case, we get to look into them, to address them, and know how to go about managing them so that we are better able to remain productive in our day-to-day activities and lives. So self-governance is ruling oneself under the authority, number one, of God, so that life reflects wisdom, discipline, and also purpose. When we speak about being under the authority of God, it's basically to tell us that even this life is not our own to start with. God created us for a purpose and for a reason for something. And every one of us has a mission to accomplish on this earth. But we cannot be able to accomplish it if we do not partner with our Maker, who is God. Then on the other hand, we don't just partner with God, we also need to partner with ourselves as the individuals in this case. We must be able to understand ourselves better so that we can arise to the task, so that we can manage to even move towards the goal which has been set before us. And in the biblical context, when we get to look at self-governance, it looks into allowing God to rule one's heart so that our thoughts, our words, our decisions, our habits, and our desires come under godly control. So basically, that is an understanding of this term self-governance. Are you able to lead yourself? Are you able to manage yourself? Are you able to bring your emotions and the impulses under control? Are you able to arise and to live according to the truth, according to the values one stands for, rather than just being controlled by the things around us? What does self-governance look like? Self-governance looks like a number of things. Number one being self-control. Number two being walking in discipline. Number three being taking responsibility. Number four, wisdom and walking in wisdom. Then finally is that aspect of stewardship. When we get to look at the first bit of self-control, this is basically that ability to be in charge of one's emotions, one's desires, one's speech, and one's action. While self-control is a fruit of the Spirit, as we are told in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 to 23, we see it as one important aspect of our being, of our making, when we are able to govern ourselves, our emotions, because at the end of the day, out of our inner self flows our actions. Out of our inner selves flows our words. Proverbs also 25 verse 28 says, allow me to read, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. That like a city whose walls have been bleached or the security has been bleached, then that can be compared to a person who lacks self-control. And in this case, we get to see that self-control itself is a hedge of protection around ourselves it saves us from a lot. When you have self-control, especially when you are in a context, maybe in a working context, or even in your day-to-day activities, then it prevents us from going towards the vices. And as a result, that alone forms a hedge and a wall of protection around us. So in this case, we can ask ourselves, have I passed in this bit of being able to arise and build up my aspect of being able to have self-control? Am I in control of my emotions? Am I in control of my desires? Am I in control of my speech? And am I in control of my actions? On to the next bit of what self-governance looks like is the bit of discipline. Discipline looks into doing what is right consistently, even when one does not feel like it. You know, sometimes we see discipline as punishment, but when we look at this part of discipline, it's that bit of being so intentional. Discipline calls for a lot of intentionality, and our being like, no, I won't be going towards this path or leaning towards this side because this is not based on what I stand for. This is not right, in short. So when you look at discipline, it's also a part of training. It's not easy. It's not easy to walk in discipline. But when we approach it as training, then that will help us to be able to build the right foundation that will help us develop our character, that will help us also gain wisdom, that will also help us to acquire self-control, which we have spoken about, and also it will help us to walk in godliness. And as a result, once we're able to walk in discipline, then we become people who God has called us to be. I am sent back to individuals that God was able to walk with in the Bible. These great people that we read about, one of them being Joseph in the Bible. When we look at him, for him he was so intentional about this bit of discipline. He knew his boundaries. Discipline speaks about knowing our boundaries. To what extent can I go towards something? It speaks about being able to stay even within a society or within also a community, and you know to what extent should you go. What line can I not cross? So we see Joseph on this side, and for him, because he knew, number one, even the kind of God that he served, because at the end of the day, our God has something we call standards. And these standards are what help us to keep in check. These standards, or the laws that we say, we read about, the standards of God cannot and can never be compromised. They are what help us to live a disciplined and a well-intended life. And we see for Joseph, even at a moment where he was almost caught up at a situation where he could have compromised. After all, he was alone in that house with Potiphar's wife. But because Joseph knew what he was meant to be doing at that time, number one, even he was supposed to be working. No one was watching him. He was alone in that house, and that's how even he was caught up in that what we can call mess, which later on we see that it was God's intent for that situation to happen. But we see Joseph, he was here in the right place, doing the right thing, and things caught up with him. And his discipline, at the end of the day, even after being taken to prison, what happened is that he was able to overcome. That testimony of him being able to lead an upright life gave him a position in a prison where he went through again another season of training, and that training is what enabled him to emerge as a leader. In Hebrews 12 verse 11, we are told that no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. So when you speak about discipline, it's not easy. This one is taking me back to the time when we were in school. It was not easy to wake up early. It was not easy to go by the schedule that was allocated there. It wasn't easy to be under the teacher's eye all the time. But at the end of the day, what came out of it is that it brought out a character inside of us. And some of these things we picked during our lives in high school, in boarding schools, that is what we have continually carried on consistently. And we are able to continue living our lives that are productive in this side. So the question we can ask ourselves here is, do I lead a disciplined life even when it's uncomfortable or the situations are unfavorable? Or is it that we will be like that wave tossed by the wind that James talks about, that we only flow with things that we feel like our flesh wants or we are comfortable with? When it comes to discipline, it's not about us, but it's about what needs to be done that is right at that time. On the other note, we get to look at self-governance in the area of responsibility. When we speak about responsibility, this is taking ownership of one's life choices, growth, actions, and consequences instead of blaming others. Sometimes we may find ourselves in a situation where maybe we have entered ourselves into a mess. The question is, how willing are we normally to accept our mistake and own up instead of pointing fingers and finding scapegoats or people to blame? So when we talk about responsibility, it's upon everyone to make, number one, their own choices, because as adults, as young people also, we are in charge of our own choices. Even God, at the end of the day, he was like, I won't interfere with this bit of your choices and whatever. That's why he gave us free will, so that we are able to arise to make our own choices. Even a young child, they have the free will bit, because you'll tell them don't do this, and the next minute you'll find them doing whatever they are being told not to do. But when it speaks about responsibility, is that, are you willing to face the consequence of that choice that you have picked from the onset? In 1 Corinthians 4 verse 2, it's required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. When we speak about responsibility, it looks into faithfulness. It looks into our ability to look at whatever it is that we have been blessed with and be able to manage it well and to be proven faithful in this area. And number one place we must purpose to take responsibility is our own self, our own bodies, our own attitudes, our own thoughts, whatever we feed ourselves with, looking at the gateways of our hearts. Because at the end of the day, there are consequences to every choice that we get to make. But if we first continue being irresponsible in the area first of even taking care of our own hearts, we will be looking at that in one of the topics in this series. When we are irresponsible in taking care, say, of our own hearts, at the end of the day, because out of the abundance of the heart flows the things of life, what happens? We end up messing up. We end up going down the wrong path. So in this bit of responsibility, how is it that we end up at the end of the day even blaming people for things that we ourselves put ourselves in that fire? Then we start blaming others for these things. So we can ask ourselves the question, do I keep on pointing fingers at other people, whereas the finger should actually be pointed back at me? That is part of taking responsibility. The other bit is that bit of wisdom. When we speak about wisdom in self-governance, we are talking about the ability to apply knowledge, understanding, and truths in a way that produces good and godly decisions. Wisdom is making decisions based on knowledge and understanding, truth, and long-term purpose in the end. In James 1 verse 5, it says that if anyone lacks wisdom, you should ask of God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. So why is wisdom such an important part of self-governance? It's because we may have knowledge, we may have skill, we may have everything at our disposal, But if we are not able to bring this together, to work together for the good, then what normally happens, we cannot apply it well. And as a result, it will be just a waste of resources. So wisdom is also listed as a gift of the Spirit, and it's God-given ability. It's a gift of the Holy Spirit. So what are we supposed to do in this case? We should desire to ask ourselves, what is my truth? Am I able to apply knowledge? Am I able to apply understanding? And what is my long-term and short-term purpose in the end? Finally, looking at stewardship, which is also a measure of self-governance. Here we are speaking about being able to manage resources in an appropriate way, keeping in mind that one is only just but a custodian of whatever it is that we have. Stewardship is closely linked with responsibility. They can be closely related in this way, because everything again that we have is not our own. So am I able to bring myself to a level where I can be a faithful custodian of whatever I have? 1 Peter 4:10 tells us that each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in various forms. So when we look at self-governance here, then we must be able first to be faithful with whatever it is that is within our care. Then after that, when we prove ourselves faithful to God, stewarding the things that we have been blessed with well, then from there we can be able to arise and now take up other greater responsibilities that may come our way. So I will leave us with a question too on this note. How do I manage my time? How do I manage my gifts? How do I manage the resources at my disposal? In self-governance and in this series, we shall be looking at a number of topics. Now, based on this, we shall be delving deeper. And it's my prayer that by the end of it, every one of us will have been able to go through a journey of self-reflection, so that when all is said and done, we shall be able to arise as individuals that can first be responsible for themselves before we are put in charge of those around us and resources within the society.